My name is Daniel Carrington. I'm 38 years old, single, and the head librarian of a tiny town you could miss with a single blink as you drive by. Evergreen Hollow, population 1,432, more or less. My life is quiet and uneventful. Each day begins the same. I open the library at 9 a.m., organize books, assist the occasional visitor in locating an obscure title, and lock up by 6 p.m. Evenings are just as predictable. Making dinner, reading a book, and dozing off before 10 p.m. I live alone in a modest bungalow 3 blocks from the library. The house isn't much. A 2-bedroom structure with a perpetually dripping kitchen faucet and creaky floorboards I keep postponing repairs on. The place smells of coffee and old wood, a side effect of my excessive caffeine consumption and my neglectful cleaning habits. My only company is Jasper, my grouchy tabby cat, who seems to find joy in knocking over anything precariously perched on the edge of a table. He's a bit of trouble but comforting in his way. Evergreen Hollow's residents are polite, but I wouldn't call them close friends. Maybe that's on me. I'm not much for socializing. The library feels like a haven. There's a soothing familiarity to the smell of books and the muted stillness of the place. It's where the world slows down, a space untouched by chaos or noise. Still, there's an oddness to the library I can't quite explain. Occasionally, I catch fleeting movements in the back aisles, or a book inexplicably topples from a high shelf with a startling crash. Logical explanations exist, I'm sure, but I can't shake the feeling that something more is at play. Sometimes, it feels as though my life is trapped in a perpetual loop. Wake up, work, return home, repeat. Small-town life is predictable. Surprises are rare, and the mundane rules. Perhaps that's why I adore old books. They capture the essence of lives far more adventurous than my own. Tales of kings, adventurers, criminals, and lovers live within their pages, a contrast to my steady routine. Unearthing a rare book in the library's storage or at estate sales is like discovering a long-lost secret, and I often lose hours imagining the stories behind them. The back room of the library is my favorite retreat. It's where neglected books end up, outdated encyclopedias, overlooked manuscripts, and unwanted donations. Rows of sagging shelves hold treasures untouched for decades. The musty air carries the scent of mildew and aging paper. When the library is quiet, I'll sneak back there to browse, hoping to stumble upon a hidden gem. Sometimes, I come across books that exude an unsettling aura, almost as though they hold secrets better left undiscovered. One day, Mr. Sullivan, my boss, approached my desk. A wiry man in his 60s with thick glasses and a raspy voice. He was never one for small talk. That's why I was surprised when he placed a folded piece of paper on my desk and cleared his throat. "Rules," he said, tapping the paper with a gnarled finger. "Follow them exactly if you want to keep working here." I unfolded the note, my brow furrowing at the contents. The first 4 rules were unusual but harmless. Always feed the goldfish before closing. If the lights go out, close your eyes until they return. They always do. Never touch the 3rd book on the 2nd shelf in the back room. Don't allow anyone to check out a book without a barcode. But the 5th rule was different. It sent a chill down my spine. Always tell the truth. It might just save your life. I glanced up, half expecting him to crack a grin or claim it was a joke, but his expression remained unreadable. Without another word, he turned and left me alone with the paper and a growing unease. One cold December afternoon, the library was eerily empty. Snow had fallen steadily all morning, leaving the streets deserted. Only Mrs. Lancaster, an elderly patron, had stopped by to return 3 well-worn romance novels and to deliver her usual lament about how kids these days just don't appreciate good literature. By noon, I retreated to the back room, telling myself I was tidying up, though boredom was my true motivation. That's when I saw it. Tucked between two crumbling atlases on an overlooked shelf was a peculiar book. Its dark brown, almost black cover resembled leather, though it was rough and uneven as if stretched by hand. It had no title, just a tiny clasp keeping it shut. Touching the cover made my skin prickle. The leather felt disturbingly warm, almost alive. Instinct told me to put it back, but curiosity won. I unfastened the clasp and opened the book. Inside, the neat, slanted handwriting immediately stood out. Each word was written in faded brown ink, the pages delicate to the touch. At the top of the first page, bold letters spelled, "The Naughty List." I chuckled, thinking it might be a strange joke or a quirky diary with a holiday twist. But as I turned the pages, my amusement vanished. The book was filled with names, hundreds or even thousands, each crossed out with a heavy line, all except one. At the bottom of the last page, beneath all the crossed-out names, was mine, Daniel Carrington. I stared at the name, frozen in disbelief. My hands trembled as I flipped back through the book, searching for an explanation, a note, anything. But there was nothing but page after page of crossed-out names. "Okay, Daniel," I muttered, my voice shaky. "This has to be a prank. Someone's trying to mess with you. But how?" No one else ventured into the back room, and I had never seen the book before. Besides, how could they know my name? My full name? Jasper let out a low, eerie yowl from the doorway, startling me so much I nearly dropped the book. He stood there, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. His fur stood on end as he slowly backed away, ignoring my attempts to shoo him off. "Fine, you little coward," I muttered, snapping the book shut. "I'll handle this myself." The rest of the day passed in uneasy distraction. I locked the book in my desk drawer and tried to focus on my duties, but my thoughts kept drifting back to it. By the time I closed up the library that evening, I was mentally drained. Still, I couldn't resist the pull to take the book home. I needed answers. That night, seated at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, I opened the book again. This time I noticed something new. The crossed-out names weren't just scribbles. Under the light, faint impressions were visible beneath the ink, words hidden in the shadows. Grabbing a pencil, I gently shaded over one of the names. The message emerged like a ghost rising from the page. "Found by the fire, 1842. A chill ran down my spine. I tried another. "Taken from the shadows, 1927. And another. "Dragged screaming into the snow, 1899. "Last seen under the tree, 1975. Each phrase was more unsettling than the last, painting a picture of horror I couldn't yet comprehend. Then there was my name. My stomach churned as I shaded over the space beneath it, silently begging it to reveal nothing. But faint words appeared regardless. "Before midnight." The blood drained from my face. Midnight? Tonight? I barely had time to process it before a sound interrupted my thoughts. At first, it seemed like the wind, but it grew sharper. A scraping noise, like claws dragging against glass. It was coming from the living room window. The noise eventually stopped, or maybe it didn't, and I just stopped hearing it. Either way, my nerves were shot. Midnight crept closer, and the phrase "before midnight" played in my mind like a clock counting down. The weight of the book's dark leather cover pressed heavily on the table before me. There had to be something I could do. This couldn't be real. Books don't kill people. Lists don't kill people. Or did they? As much as I wanted to dismiss it all as a cruel joke, the crossed-out names refused to let me. I couldn't unsee the phrases tied to each one. and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had claimed those people was now coming for me. Desperately flipping through the book, I stumbled across something unusual. Among thousands of crossed-out names, one stood out, circled in faded red ink: Gerald H. Bonner. Unlike my name, his wasn't at the end of the list but buried among names from the 1940s and 50s. My pulse raced as I stared at it. Gerald H. Bonner. His name hadn't been crossed out. Why? Grabbing my laptop, I searched the name, expecting to find nothing. To my surprise, a few results appeared. One in particular made my stomach tighten. A mugshot. Gerald H. Bonner, a 76-year-old man, had been arrested 6 months earlier for assault. The article noted he had been released on bail and was living in a nearby town, Raven Hill, only 40 miles away. The realization hit hard. Gerald was alive. He was the only other name besides mine that hadn't been crossed out. That meant he might know something that could explain this list or even save me. The drive to Raven Hill was nerve-wracking. Snow lashed against my windshield, and the icy roads made every turn treacherous. My eyes darted between the clock on the dashboard and the shifting shadows outside. Each minute brought me closer to midnight. Each dark silhouette sent a shiver down my spine. This was madness, I told myself. Gerald H. Bonner wouldn't know anything about a cursed book. But what choice did I have? Arriving at a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of Raven Hill, I parked and studied the dilapidated building. Its cracked brick walls, rusted balconies, and flickering neon sign reading Ravenwood Apartment gave it an air of desolation. It wasn't a place anyone would willingly visit at night, but time wasn't on my side. According to the article, Gerald lived in Unit 2B. The hallway reeked of mildew and something sour, with peeling paint on the walls and a damp, squishy carpet underfoot. As I approached his door, doubt crept in. What was I even planning to say? "Hi, I found your name in a cursed book. Want to talk about it?" Before I could second-guess myself, I knocked. The door creaked open almost immediately, releasing a wave of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Standing in the doorway was a tall but hunched man with greasy gray hair and a face like wrinkled leather. His bloodshot eyes and yellowed teeth completed the image. "Who the hell are you?" he barked. "Mr. Bonner?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "My name is Daniel Carrington. I need to talk to you about something important." "Important?" He snorted. "You trying to sell me something?" "No, listen, this will sound crazy, but your name is in a book I found. It's a list of people who should mind their own damn business," he cut in, beginning to shut the door. "Wait," I yelped, jamming my foot into the gap. "This book, it's called The Naughty List. Your name is in it, and it's not crossed out." That stopped him. For a brief moment, his watery eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it. Recognition, tinged with fear. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a scowl. "You're either drunk, crazy, or both," he grumbled, though his tone had softened. He opened the door wider. "Fine. You want to waste my time? Get in here." The apartment was worse than I'd expected. Beer cans covered every available surface, and the air reeked of unwashed clothes and burnt food. Gerald slumped into a tattered recliner and gestured for me to sit on a couch that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 70s. I perched on the edge, clutching the book tightly. "So," Gerald said, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands, "what's this about a list?" I opened the book to his name. "This list," I said, showing him. "It's full of names all crossed out, except yours. And mine." His eyes narrowed as he leaned in, studying the page. He didn't speak for a long time, though his lips twitched like he was holding back words he didn't want to say. "Listen, kid," he said finally, exhaling a cloud of smoke. I don't know what you think you've got there, but you don't want to mess with it. Trust me. You recognize it, I pressed. You know what it is? He hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. Yeah, I've seen it before. A long time ago. What is it? What happens to the people on the list? His laugh was sharp and bitter. What happens? They die. Every last one of them. One way or another, they all get what's coming to them. Do you think it's a coincidence I'm the only name left? I've been dodging this thing for decades. It's like a damn curse. My heart raced. How did you survive? Why hasn't it come for you? He shot me a sharp look. You don't think I tried to figure that out? I've done everything. Burned the book. Buried it. Gave it to some idiot to pass the curse along. But it doesn't matter. Nothing works. You're on the list, you're screwed. End of story. So there's no way to stop it? Nope. The best you can do is buy yourself some time. Or pass it on to someone else. Someone you don't care about. He gave me a cruel smile. Good luck, kid. Now get the hell out. I left Gerald's apartment feeling worse than when I'd arrived. He was vile, bitter, and mean in a way that defied explanation. I wasn't sure if I believed everything he'd told me, but one thing was clear. If anyone deserved to be on that list, it was him. Outside, the snow was falling harder, covering the parking lot in a thick white layer. I was halfway to my car when I heard a faint scratching noise coming from Gerald's apartment. I froze, turning back. The sound grew louder and sharper, cutting through the frigid air. It seemed to be coming from above. From the chimney, the sound grew louder. A scraping, crunching rumble that didn't belong to anything human. I froze by my car, snowflakes clinging to my hair, my breath fogging the icy air. My brain screamed at me to leave, to get in the car and drive far away, but my body refused to move. My eyes were locked on Gerald's apartment. A heavy thud shook the night, rattling the window closest to the chimney. Whatever was descending wasn't small. Then, the noise stopped, leaving an eerie silence that somehow felt worse. And then I saw it. The chimney flue burst outward in an explosion of soot and crumbling brick. A hulking figure emerged, crouching low in Gerald's dimly lit living room. My stomach twisted. The thing was not human. Couldn't be. Towering at least 7 feet tall, it had gnarled, elongated limbs covered in coarse black fur. Curved horns jutted from its head, scraping the low ceiling as it unfolded itself with unnatural ease. Its glowing red eyes scanned the room like a predator on the hunt, and jagged teeth gleamed in the dim light. A filthy, bulging sack hung from its back, its fabric writhing as if something alive were trapped inside. I pressed myself flat against the hood of my car, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would hear me. Through the apartment's window I had a clear view, but I prayed it wouldn't look out. Inside, Gerald was frozen in his recliner, his face pale and ashen. His cigarette slipped from his lips. The creature moved faster than I thought possible for something so significant. It lunged across the room, grabbing Gerald by the front of his shirt before he could even rise. Gerald screamed, thrashing wildly, but the creature's claws gripped him like iron, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The screams turned into a garbled, desperate wail as the creature leaned in, its grotesque face inches from Gerald's. Then it opened its mouth, and the sound that emerged chilled me to the core. It wasn't a roar or growl. It was laughter, a deep, guttural, otherworldly laughter that shook the very walls. I could only watch, paralyzed, as the creature reached into its sack and pulled out a small, ornate wooden box. The box was strangely beautiful, intricately carved with patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light. The creature set the box on the floor, opened the lid, and began its work. Gerald flailed and shrieked, clawing at the creature's arms, but it was futile. The beast began to fold him. That was the only way to describe it. It bent his body in impossible ways, compacting him as if he were a doll. Bones cracked, flesh compressed, and his screams turned into strangled, inhuman sounds. The thing didn't pause. It worked methodically, shoving Gerald into the box, piece by piece, until his entire body had disappeared inside. The last thing I saw was his face, still alive, contorted in terror, before the creature slammed the lid shut. It was over in seconds. Silence fell. The creature stood for a moment, its hunched back to the window, cradling the box in its massive hands. Then slowly it turned. Its glowing red eyes locked onto mine. I don't know how it saw me through the dark and snow, but it did. The light of its gaze pierced through me, and for one horrifying moment, I felt like I was the only thing it could see. Then it smiled. The grin stretched across its grotesque face, revealing rows of jagged yellow teeth. It wasn't a smile of warmth. It was the smile of a predator savoring its prey. One clawed finger extended, pointing directly at me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no, no." The creature's laughter echoed in my mind as I scrambled into my car, fumbling with the keys. My hands trembled so violently that it took 3 tries to get them into the ignition. When the engine finally roared to life, I slammed the car into reverse, nearly skidding into a snowbank as I peeled out of the parking lot. My headlights cut through the falling snow, but in my rearview mirror, the creature was still standing at the window, its glowing eyes burning like embers. I didn't stop driving until I was halfway back to Evergreen Hollow. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and my chest felt ready to burst. The radio was off, the heater blasting, but I couldn't stop shivering. Every shadow on the road seemed alive, every sound like claws scraping across the snow. What had I just seen? Could it have been confirmed? It had to be. No hallucination could feel so vivid, so terrifying. And if it was real, what did that mean for me? Gerald's words rang in my mind. The best you can do is buy yourself some time. He had known what was coming. He had seen it before. And now, so had I. It all came back to the book. Gerald claimed he'd tried burning it, burying it, even passing it to someone else. Nothing had worked, but he'd survived for decades. How? There had to be something he had done to hold it at bay, some way to stay one step ahead. The only lead I had was the book, which sat on the passenger seat like a dark, heavy presence. I reached over, flipping it open with one hand as I navigated the snowy road. My name stared back at me from the bottom of the last page, uncrossed and stark. Beneath it were the chilling words. Before midnight, I flipped back to the other pages, scanning the phrases I'd uncovered earlier. Found by the fire, 1842. Taken from the shadows, 1927. Dragged screaming into the snow, 1899. The connections between the victims didn't make sense. What tied them together? Why were they chosen? And then, a thought struck me like a lightning bolt. Gerald. He had been a cruel, violent man, a predator who hurt others without a second thought. Could that be it? Was the list some grim punishment for the wicked? So, then why was my name on it? I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't evil. Was I? My mind spiraled as the miles passed, snow falling harder and obscuring the road ahead. I squinted through the windshield, grappling with the unsettling thought. Maybe the book wasn't just a list. Perhaps it was a test. A sudden thump jolted me out of my thoughts. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop in the middle of the desolate road. My breath hitched as I scanned my surroundings, but there was nothing, just darkness and falling snow. Then I heard it. Laughter. Deep, guttural, and disturbingly close. I froze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Though the laughter faded into the night, it lingered in my mind like an echo. The book sat on the seat beside me, its presence oppressive, almost alive. Midnight was closing in, and with it, something I couldn't escape. I had to act. Then it came to me not as an idea but as a memory. A jagged, buried fragment of my past forced its way to the surface. Years ago, in my early 20s, life had been rough. I was broke, desperate, and angry at the world. It had been a freezing winter night, not unlike this one, when I saw the house. 2 stories tall, warm light glowing through the windows. A place that seemed far removed from my struggles. It looked like the kind of home that wouldn't miss a few valuables. The decision wasn't conscious. One moment I was walking past, and the next I was inside. The door hadn't been locked, and I convinced myself it wasn't really breaking in if the door was open. But deep down, I knew better. I took only a few items, a watch from the mantel and some small trinkets that looked valuable. I told myself it was enough to get by for a week. But as I slipped out the back door, an alarm blared. Panic surged through me, and I bolted into the night. Before I could get far, flashing police lights illuminated the house. I ducked into a nearby alley, my heart hammering, and watched from the shadows. That's when I saw him. A guy around 18 or 19, walking down the street with headphones on. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The cops stopped him and questioned him. He looked confused and scared. Then they cuffed him and put him in the back of a patrol car. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Later, I read about him in the newspaper. A college student studying engineering. He swore he was innocent, but the evidence was stacked against him. His fingerprints had been on the front door, likely from delivering a package days earlier, but that didn't matter. The police wanted a suspect, and he was convenient. I told myself it wasn't my fault. I hadn't planted his prints. Maybe he'd committed other crimes. But deep down, I knew the truth. What I had done was wrong. And now, my name was in the book. I didn't even realize I was driving again until the city lights appeared. The streets were quiet, muffled by the snow. I parked in front of the sheriff's station, my stomach churning with dread. My breath fogged the windshield as I stared at the building. The dashboard clock read 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes until midnight. Could I outrun this? Could I pass the curse to someone else? No. I grabbed the book, shoved it into my coat, and stepped out of the car. The freezing air stung my face, but I barely noticed. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the station steps. The front door creaked loudly, echoing through the empty lobby. Behind the counter sat Sheriff Carter, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache and weary eyes. He looked up from his coffee and newspaper, his brow furrowing. "Daniel, what are you doing here so late?" I took a deep, shaky breath. "I need to talk to someone. About something I did." His eyes narrowed. "What kind of something?" "It's complicated." I hesitated, then blurted. "There was a break-in. Years ago. A house on Willow Street. Someone was arrested for it, but it wasn't them. It was me." The room felt colder as Sheriff Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression difficult to read. "That's quite the confession to walk in with, Daniel. You realize you're accusing yourself of a felony, don't you?" "I know," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't care. I need to set things right." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity before sighing heavily and picking up the phone. "Stay right here." It didn't take long for them to bring him in. His name was Jason Daniels, and I recognized him instantly, even after all these years. Time had hardened his features, and bitterness was etched into every line of his face. He entered the station cautiously, his shoulders hunched as if bracing for a blow. When his eyes landed on me, they narrowed in sharp recognition. I swallowed hard and forced the words out. "I'm the one who broke into that house. The one on Willow Street. You were innocent." Silence filled the room. Sheriff Carter leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, watching with a frown. Jason's face was unreadable at first, but then he laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. "After all these years, you just show up and confess? What am I supposed to thank you? You destroyed my life." "I know," I said softly. "I'm sorry." "Sorry?" He stepped closer, his voice rising with anger. "Do you have any idea what I went through? What did my family go through? The trial, the fines, the whispers every time I walked down the street? They kicked me out of college. I couldn't get a job for years because of you. I know, I should have come forward back then, but I was scared. I was selfish." Jason stared at me, his hands clenched into tight fists. For a moment I thought he might hit me, and I wouldn't have stopped him if he had. But instead he turned away, shaking his head in frustration. Sheriff Carter cleared his throat. "Well, Daniel, if you're serious about this, you'll need to make a full statement. Jason has every right to press charges." Jason didn't respond. He stood there, staring at the floor, his jaw locked tight with emotion. "Why now?" he finally asked, his voice cold. "Why are you telling me this now? Do you think this fixes anything? Saying sorry doesn't undo what you did to me." "I don't expect it to," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness." Jason's eyes burned into mine, filled with resentment and pain. "And what does that do for me, huh? What's done is done. He wasn't wrong." And the weight of his words struck me deeply. The air in the room grew heavier until Sheriff Carter broke the silence. "Jason, let's take a step back for a moment. Daniel's here to confess, and we'll handle it seriously. You've got every right to be angry, but let me focus on the legal side of this." "All right." Jason didn't answer. He stared at me for another agonizing moment before finally pushing himself out of the chair and storming out the door. The station felt eerily quiet after Jason left. Sheriff Carter gestured for me to follow him into a small interview room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he pulled out a notebook and pen and motioned for me to sit down. "Start from the beginning," he said. I told him everything. The break-in, the stolen items, the false arrest. Each word dragged up memories I'd long buried, each detail forcing me to confront the full weight of what I'd done. The sheriff listened quietly, jotting down notes and asking questions only when necessary. When I was done, he stood up to make some calls. That's when I noticed it. 2 glowing red orbs hovered just outside the frosted glass window. At first, I thought they might be distant car lights reflecting in the snow, but they didn't move. They just burned there, steady and unblinking. My heart sank as a terrible realization dawned on me. Krampus. He was watching. The red lights blinked, shifting slightly before vanishing altogether. But the chill in the air remained, and I knew it wasn't over. It's been 3 months since that night. My trial is set to begin next week. My lawyer, a wiry man named Thomas Grayson, has already warned me not to get my hopes up. The evidence against me is overwhelming. My confession, the timeline, and the stolen items I'd unearthed from the back of my closet and turned over. "I'll be honest with you, Daniel," Thomas said the other day. "The jury isn't going to like you. You let an innocent young man take the fall while you just went on with your life. We can argue for leniency, but I don't know if it'll help much. He wasn't wrong. Jason Daniels had already provided a detailed statement about the toll my actions had taken on his life. I'd read it. The humiliation, the anger, the lost opportunities. I had destroyed his future before it had a chance to begin. And now, years later, there was no way to undo that damage. The truth is, my odds don't look good. The prosecutor is pushing for the maximum sentence, and I can't deny that I deserve it. Yet, despite all this, there's a strange calm within me. For the first time in my life, I'm not running from what I've done. Still, my life is in shambles. The librarian job? Gone. The town gossip mill erupted the moment my arrest hit the papers. My neighbors avoid me, and even the barista at the coffee shop struggles to meet my gaze. Only Jasper, my cat, remains the same, still knocking things off counters as though nothing's changed. He's the only constant in the chaos. Most days, I find myself thinking about Krampus, about why he spared me. I don't know why he crossed my name off that list. Was it my confession? The punishment I had set into motion for myself? Or did he enjoy watching me writhe under the weight of my guilt? Whatever the reason, I saw him do it. Just before he vanished into the shadows outside the sheriff's station that night, he pulled out the book. His claws moved over the page with precision, crossing my name off with swift, deliberate strokes. It wasn't mercy. Not really. It was a warning. I think about that night every time I see the book. Yes, I still have it. Somehow, it always ends up back in my possession, no matter what I do. I've tried burning it, burying it, and even throwing it into the river. Each time, it reappears, sitting neatly on my kitchen table like a recurring nightmare. And then there was the letter. It arrived a week after my confession. No return address, no stamp. Just an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 6 words scrawled in blood-red ink. The poem read, "The naughty list is carved in fate, its ink of shadows cold as hate. A single rule, both explicit and dire. Stay far away or face the fire." At the bottom was a postscript. Pass. Be good, Daniel? Or else. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I knew exactly who had sent it. There's so much I still don't know about that night. I don't know what Krampus truly is. Demon, enforcer, or something entirely beyond comprehension. I don't know how he chooses his victims or what criteria determine who lives and who dies. I don't even know if I'll ever indeed be free of him. But here's the truth, the thing I grapple with every night since that winter. I'm thankful for Krampus. I don't know if that makes me a bad person, but without him, I doubt I'd have ever faced the truth about myself. I'd have kept lying, running, and pretending to be better than I was. My life now is far from perfect. Much of it is worse, but at least, for once, I did the right thing. Krampus gave me a second chance. A terrifying, brutal chance, but a chance nonetheless. As I sit here writing this, the book lies on the table next to me. This leather feels colder now, and its pages are heavier. The list is shorter, but it isn't gone. It never will be. Somewhere, someone else is reading their name for the first time, feeling the same dread I felt when I saw mine. I don't know if Krampus will ever come back for me. Maybe he will. Perhaps I'll falter again and end up back on the naughty list. Until then, I'll keep trying to do better. That's all I can do. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned. We've got some great stories coming up on this channel in the next few weeks. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Have a good night.